I have online, I'd like to invite David Fleming Munoz. His presentation is Exploring Adaptive Capacity and Resilience in the GBR Tourism Industry During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Thanks, David.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Okay, awesome. So let me share my screen. Okay, can you see the slides? All good? Okay, awesome. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Fleming Munoz. I'm an economist at CSIRO, and I'm going to present what we're doing in a project where the title of the presentation is Exploring Adaptive Capacity and Resilience in the GBR tourism industry, but everything in the context of the COVID pandemic. Important to notice that this project is part of a research model of the social and economic long-term monitoring of the GBR big project that CSIRO is running. We have been working in this particular research module with Matt Cornock, who is in the audience there with you, and Henry Bartlett, who is a PhD student at GCU. And the topic is relevant, of course, right? Because the tourism industry is, as an industry, is highly dependent on, especially in the GBR, on nature and also on the consumer's discretionary spending, right? So any different type of shocks generally affects the industry in a negative way, right? So we have human-induced shocks like the 9/11 or the GFC, which brought some negative consequences to the industry, but also natural extreme events like cyclones or even bleaching events affects the industry. And this is important because it's not that we are interested in the industry, of course we are, but also the industry sits in different regions across the GBR, right? So and there are many local economies that depend on tourism activity, right, and how the industry is doing. So, and it has been shown internationally that actually regions that depend more on tourism activity have lower resilience to shocks. So it's important to understand a little bit what are the different aspects, what are different factors that affect the resilience of the industry and what the industry can do actually to overcome this. And all of this in the context of COVID bring us to a very special case, right? Because as we all know, COVID has been an unprecedented shock in the whole world, right? Bringing a lot of different challenges and a lot of uncertainty on how things are going to be shaping in the near future. And it has affected all industries, right? Not just the tourism industry in the GBR, all different industries in Australia and in the world. But as a case study, it's very interesting because it's some sort of an extreme of a shock. So it's a good opportunity to get some lessons and some learnings and how things can work out for future events, right? Of what are the key factors and things to have in consideration to improve resilience, right, and the adaptive capacity of an industry such as the tourism industry. So that, given that in hand, our main aim of this work, which is actually work in progress, we have been only working a few months in the project. We have two main goals, right? One is to identify the key factors and system components that enhance or inhibit actually the industry adaptation and resilience to not just the COVID pandemic, but also to try to understand how these are going to be important for future extreme events. And also to identify indicators of industry resilience for long-term monitoring and benchmarking. And the idea, of course, is not to do this project in isolation. So we have been, the idea is to provide insights and to support other endeavors, like, for instance, the Tourist Management Action Strategy that WUMPA just released. Ideally, this project will provide some insights and some support to the strategy, and maybe with monitoring and evaluation metrics that we could come in the project, but also to complement other studies that are happening. For instance, Henry, one of co-authors, is also doing his PhD dissertation on microeconomic adaptation of tourism operators in the GBR. So the idea is to complement his insights and his findings with this work to have a more comprehensive and holistic analysis. This slide very quickly, but just to show you that we have been applying an adaptive research design, right? Because given COVID, given all the challenges and the impacts that nobody was expecting from COVID, we have had to adapt also our research project. So we have been changing some of the timing of it, some of the questions that we're asking, who are we targeting, etc. But all of that under an umbrella of guidance from a tourist export advisory group, which has been a great source for us. And in terms of methods, we have been doing interviews with tourism operators, but also with supporting institutions to try to understand how is the adaptation they have been doing during the COVID pandemic. I'm going to present a little bit of insights about especially the supporting institutions interviews. But also our aim is to do some regional analysis, economic analysis, and some economic modeling to try to understand how has been the dynamics of different local economies across the GBR, and to see how much the pandemic has influenced the dynamics of the industry and how the impacts on the industry has affected actually the local economies across the GBR. And the idea is to do this using maybe idea is data from the census that we just completed a couple of months ago. That's going to be available for analysis in early next year. So with that census, it's going to be very interesting to see kind of how different regions have been impacted and if there are any signs of recovery or different type of recoveries across different regions of the GBR. And we're going to conclude with a workshop to identify key performance indicators for resilience, but also to discuss a little bit the vision and the goal setting with a group of stakeholders. That the idea to have this workshop next year when we have more findings from our data collection and analysis. And well, stuff that we all know, but we have been learning and listening also from all the interviews is that to adapt to different challenges, to different shock is not an easy thing, right? And especially it brings many challenges, but the unprecedented pandemic of COVID have been even more challenges, right, to the industry, especially to the industry, because we have been through a type of roller coaster type of event with COVID, with different lockdowns, with the international border closures at the start, then with some state border closures, then the border closures open and everything is reopened and we have a flow of tourists, but then it's at lockdown again. So it has been a very chaotic time during the last year and a half, which is very challenging, of course.
David, the time is over.
Yeah, one more minute.
Thank you.
What's that? Okay, and the other challenges, of course, in the industry constraints related to the high cost and the need for international tourists, but also the misallocation that generally happens in the industry, and not just the tourism industry, but different industries in regional Australia in terms of labor, supply and demand, right? To have a correct amount of people available to work in the industry while we have a lot of demand, changes in demand. And also the regional economic aspects, right, of the diverse regions across the GBR brings different challenges for different type of industry across the regions. And just spend half a minute of this and I'm going to conclude just kind of some of the insights that we're getting is that we have two groups of different support institutions we are looking at, right? So we have industry-dependent organizations like RTOs, peak bodies, but we have also government bodies like regulation and promotion agencies.
Thank you, David. I think the time is over now. We are over 7 minutes.
Different things, of course, across different organizations, but maybe to highlight that for the industry-dependent organizations, they have shown a very proactive approach in adaptation because there has been a lot of demand.
Are you still there, David?
Yeah. So
thank you very much.
I'm going to leave that slide. Maybe the work in progress and things are coming into the project, or if we have open for a couple of questions this time.
Great. So does anyone have a question for David? Yes, one up the back there.
Hi, David. My name's Catherine. I'm from the Marine Park Authority. I just had a question. You mentioned about the tourism industry as a whole.
Can't hear anything, so I guess there is no one there.
I think there must be a delay.
I was just wondering whether you're breaking it down further than just the tourism industry, because as in the bareboat industry is quite different to other parts of the tourism industry, charter fishing or you know, for example, resorts or other vessel-based tourism operations. Are you breaking it down further, or is it just the tourism industry as a whole that you're looking at?
Hang on, sorry, can you get a microphone, Matt? So we're having trouble with sound with David, so Matt Kernock is stepping in to answer that question.
Sorry, David, your internet seems to be cutting you off a bit. Just to answer that question very briefly, yes, we are looking at subsectors of the industry, including regional variation. There is some very strong regional variation there. Southern GBR, very different scenario and responses to the north.
Thanks, Matt. And thanks, David, for your presentation.